Are you ready to step into the darkness of the forest? Tonight, we delve into three true chilling tales from the depths of the woods. Stories whispered around campfires, passed down through generations, each one a terrifying glimpse into the unknown. We're talking about encounters that defy explanation, leaving even the most skeptical minds wondering, what if? So turn off the lights, grab your blanket, and prepare to be terrified. Our first story takes us deep into the heart of Redwood National Park, a place of towering trees and ancient secrets. Imagine, if you will, a young hiker, eager to escape the city and reconnect with nature. Let's call him Mark. Mark set off on a sunny afternoon, armed with nothing but a backpack, a map, and a thirst for adventure. He ventured deeper and deeper into the woods, the sunlight fading with every step. Hours passed, and the shadows grew longer, twisting the familiar shapes of trees into menacing silhouettes. Mark checked his map, a knot of unease forming in his stomach. He was officially off trail. Panic began to set in as darkness enveloped the forest. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps approaching in the dark. He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing like a beacon in the night, but there was no signal. He was utterly alone. Then he heard it. A faint humming sound, low and melodic, drifting through the trees. It was unlike anything he'd ever heard before, both beautiful and unsettling. He followed the sound, desperate for any sign of civilization, his heart pounding in his chest. The humming grew louder, drawing him deeper into the woods. Just when he thought he could take no more, he stumbled upon a clearing, and in the center, bathed in an ethereal light, stood a circle of towering redwoods. But these trees were different. Their bark seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and the humming sound seemed to emanate from deep within their ancient roots. As Mark stood there, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and awe, he noticed something else. Figures, shadowy figures barely discernible in the dim light, swaying rhythmically to the hypnotic hum. He couldn't make out their faces, but he could feel their eyes on him, watching his every move. Something told him to run, to turn and flee back into the darkness, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The humming intensified, vibrating through his very core, and the shadowy figures began to close in. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the humming stopped, the figures vanished, the light faded. Mark was left alone in the clearing, the silence deafening. He never spoke about what he saw that night, but the memory of the humming woods and the shadowy figures continued to haunt his dreams. Our next tale takes us to the dense, fog-shrouded forests of the Pacific Northwest. Here, nestled among the towering pines and moss-covered ground, lies a place known by locals as the Whispering Woods. Legends say that the woods are haunted by the restless spirits of loggers who met their demise within its depths. One foggy evening, a young couple, Sarah and Ben, decided to brave the legends and camp out in the Whispering Woods. Armed with a tent, supplies, and a healthy dose of skepticism, they ventured into the heart of the forest, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As they set up camp, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The air grew heavy with moisture and a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the woods in an ethereal silence. "Do you ever feel like we're being watched?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ben chuckled, trying to mask his own growing unease. "It's just the fog playing tricks on you," he replied, but his words lacked conviction. As darkness descended, the silence of the woods became almost unbearable. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching, waiting. Then, the whispers began, faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but gradually growing louder, more distinct. Voices, murmuring just beyond the edge of the firelight, speaking in hushed, unintelligible tones. Sarah and Ben exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding in their chests. They strained to make out the words, but the whispers remained tantalizingly out of reach. "It's probably just the wind," Ben said, his voice tight with tension, but Sarah could tell he didn't believe it any more than she did. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a vortex of disembodied voices. Fear gnawed at the edges of their sanity, whispering doubts and fueling their darkest fears. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the darkness just beyond the reach of their firelight. Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with terror, as a figure seemed to materialize from the fog, its features obscured by the shadows. Ben scrambled to his feet, grabbing a flashlight and shining it towards the figure, but it was gone. The whispers ceased abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Sarah and Ben huddled together for the rest of the night, too terrified to sleep, their eyes darting nervously at every flicker of shadow, every rustle of leaves. As dawn approached, the fog finally began to lift, revealing the woods bathed in the soft light of a new day. But the sense of dread that had settled over them during the night lingered, a chilling reminder of the whispers that haunted the darkness. They packed up their campsite as quickly as they could, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the whispering woods. Our final story takes us to the desolate plains of Joshua Tree National Park, a place of stark beauty and unsettling energy. Imagine a group of friends, 5 in all, on a weekend camping trip, eager to escape the city and reconnect under the vast desert sky. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the desert floor, they gathered around a crackling campfire, sharing stories and laughter. But as the stars emerged and the temperature dropped, the mood shifted. It began subtly, a feeling of unease that settled over them, a prickling sensation on the back of their necks. They dismissed it as fatigue or the chill of the desert night, but deep down, a primal fear began to stir. One by one they retreated to their tents, each trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. But sleep wouldn't come. Something felt off. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the canyons and whipping the tent walls, creating a cacophony of sound that set their nerves on edge. Then, the nightmares began, each of them plagued by vivid, disturbing dreams, filled with images of shadowy figures and a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume them. One of the friends, Emily, woke with a gasp, her heart racing, her body slick with cold sweat. She could hear the others tossing and turning in their tents, their muffled cries of terror carried on the wind. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. Emily scrambled out of her tent, her flashlight beam dancing frantically in the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She rushed towards the source of the scream, her mind racing with terrifying possibilities. The other tents were illuminated from within, casting eerie shadows across the campsite. She found her friends huddled together, their faces pale with terror, their eyes wide with a primal fear she had never witnessed before. It was here, one of them stammered, pointing to a spot just outside their tent. We saw it. Emily shone her flashlight on the spot, but there was nothing there, just the barren desert floor and the relentless wind. They decided to leave immediately, packing up their gear with trembling hands, their eyes darting nervously at every shadow, every gust of wind. As they drove away, the rising sun casting long shadows behind them, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something sinister had awakened in the darkness. Back in the city, days turned into weeks, and the horrific events of that night began to fade into memory, dismissed as a collective hallucination, a trick of the desert heat. Then, Emily found something. A photograph on her phone, taken during their frantic escape. It was a blurry image of their campsite, the early morning light casting an ethereal glow over the scene. But there, in the background, partially obscured by the shadows of a Joshua tree, stood a figure, tall, skeletal, with long, sharp claws, its eyes glowing an eerie red in the darkness. Emily stared at the photo, her blood turning to ice. They hadn't imagined it. They had brought something back with them from the desert. Something evil. These woods hold secrets, whispers of the past that are best left untouched. Sleep tight, and remember, some stories are too true to tell in the light. Because out there in the darkness, something lurks, something ancient and hungry, and it's always listening.